Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to continue our discussion on this list of American values that was published by Robert Coles in 1988. If you guys haven't had the opportunity to read the document yet, and I will chat it over to all of you again and several times during the call, but I decided to read his little front end letter or what introduction. Basically, he wrote this specifically for people who are visiting the country to better understand the country. That was his reason. And if you read it, you go like, no, this is solid. Okay, good for you. Now, again, this was written in 1988, so it's interesting to go through the list. But as we go through the list, ask and answer the question, does this still hold true today? Has something changed as we've advanced these, 35 years? Have we made any progress up the spiral dynamic? And then it's also interesting, I think, someone threw the question, where does this value live on the change grid? So we can look at that. So last time around, we just talked about this first one. And by the way, if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll notice that I took our last session and split it into two different videos. The first video was about those 7 leadership tensions that are 7 tensions that leaders need to address. And then I felt like we had a significant change, and I knew that this was going to be multiple discussions on this particular subject. So I thought, no, I'm just going to take the back end of it, set it up as its own first video so we can continue from there. So anyway, on that first video, we did talk about this first one about we need to have personal control over our own reality. And we could go through it again, but again, we've done it. So I just want to draw to everyone's attention that I think as we went through it, the first paragraph and probably most of the second and third are definitely true today. But this question about movement up the spiral dynamic was re-raised when we looked at the second paragraph. So in the United States, people consider it normal and right that man should control nature rather than the other way around. Well, when we first heard that or read that, I thought they mean after actual nature, like the planet and everything that happens on it. And as I read that, I went like, yeah, I do believe that that mankind for a long time has tried to harness every power there is in nature and has tried to convince Mother Nature that she didn't know what she was doing and we had a better way of doing things. So yeah, there's lots of examples of this happening where we turn around and find out that lo and behold, it was a mistake to remove the alpha predator from Yellowstone. So, we learn, but nevertheless, we seem to behave in that manner. Perhaps with greater awareness, we're becoming more and more thoughtful before we go and do something. So maybe there's an indication here that our trip up the spiral dynamic is actually happening. We're becoming a little bit more one with the planet instead of the one who thinks they control the planet. But then it says, more specifically, people believe that every single individual should have control over whatever in the environment might potentially affect him or her. And so I feel like that's another one where we might be moving up the dynamic, because certainly I would say that at the root of the history of the Second Amendment, this phrase may very well apply. That more specifically, people believe every single individual should have control over whatever in their environment might potentially affect him or her. Now, I can fit a lot of things inside of those, but certainly when I thought about gun control and all that, I went like, there you go. that seems to resonate with that. And then the third one, and again, I think that one might be under its own evolution up the spiral dynamic. But you look at the next one, the problems of one's life are not seen as having resulted from bad luck as much as having come from one's laziness and unwillingness to take responsibility in pursuing a better life. I get where that phrase comes from. So why should we feel sorry for anyone? Why should we raise it there? But I do believe as we've become a more complex society and things have been introduced to society, which can remove someone's ability to do what we've just said inside of a single dose. So obviously I'm thinking of some of the more recent drugs at a single exposure and you're an addict. Well, there's stuff going on that I do believe results from bad luck. I mean, yes, a decision was made, and maybe there were some underlying issues that made it easier for them to go in the direction of bad luck. But we still think, no, sometimes people get caught off guard. Stuff happens, and suddenly they don't have what they need to have. And I'm thinking about, oh, what about forest fires? Yeah, you could have chosen not to live in the woods. Or if I'm thinking about earthquakes and tsunamis, you could have chosen to live, but stuff happens. And there are victims, at least in that moment. So I would like to think that we've evolved to realize that we need to be in the position to help those who truly need help, not just those who want it, but those who have a genuine, true need for that. Um, Furthermore, it is considered normal that anyone should look out for his or her own self-interest first and foremost. I don't really know that that's a value as much as that's Maslow's hierarchy, or our own little talk about when we're evaluating change, we want to make sure that we are safe, secure, happy, and healthy. So that all seemed to hold true historically, but perhaps there is some movement up the spiral on there. Thoughts about that? Anybody?
Yeah, I read through the list a little bit more.
Yep.
And one of the things that come to mind to me is that I'm wondering about is if some of these are downgrade, like they just become so commonplace that haven't expanded that to meet the 21st century where we are.
All right. Well, that's a good opening for us to take a look at what's happening on the change grid. So as we start reading about some of these things, like Americans no longer believe in the power of fate, this idea that you are the one who is in charge of your own future and blah, 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 that we are the masters of nature, of our nature, of situations around us. You think about all these sorts of things. In the third paragraph, even that we have no reason to believe that anything lies beyond the power of humans to achieve or control. We went to the moon, maybe a bunch of other things. Maybe we didn't, but we convinced lots of people that we did. Anyway, you look at all that and you go like, all right, well, we're on the change grid as someone who walks that belief, who holds that value. Are they more upgrid or downgrid?
Or down?
Hmm. All right. Tell me about down.
Well, if you're as that languaging, from what I perceived about it, is this element of control, this heightened
Yes.
challenge.
Right. The we believe that we can control everything, that we should control
Right,
everything. Do you hear
right,
any um, conversation that one might have had with themselves or another leading up to declaring this value where they were feeling out of control? Or they
right.
were being questioned, doubts being put forth and all that. So I'm wondering whether or not this belief that we can do anything is truly spontaneous, or is it something that has actually come from how we came to be Americans, you know? So,
That's a good question. I don't know if I can if I
well,
can
that's the whole
answer
thing.
that
That's
one
what,
per se because I when I was presented with this thing, I'm like, okay, it sounds selfish to me. Like a lot of them as I read it, it really did because like even in the first one, it says self-interest. I'm like, okay, I get it.
yeah,
You're literally going to look out for your own self-interest first. I mean, that's just
yes, right.
right.
But keep in mind, that's all it says.
Right. So when I'm reading it, I'm thinking selfish a lot of this because that's not what I grew up with. And so perhaps again, that's why I was sent this because like, hey, this is so you can know how we tend to uh our lens at looking at the worldview might be uniquely different than yours, which I value that greatly.
Exactly. No,
So
exactly. So, and that's, I think, the whole thing, that's why when he put this together specifically for people who are coming to America, believing that if they understood or at least aware of these values, they'd be able to understand how Americans operate as opposed to being confused or perplexed, puzzled, whatever it all happens to be. Yeah.
So would this person that is described in number one, would that be more out grid, but not but up?
Yeah, when I
Like,
see this message, and everybody unmute and share what you think here. I think that when I read this message, this is a message that has at its heart empowerment.
ah,
That there is a belief that that we are not restrained by whatever these conventions may be, by whatever these beliefs may be, whatever da da da. We are Americans, and as a people, we really do believe that we can figure it out. We can, we can do all that. And I think that's still something that's held today, with some softening occurring, particularly in some of these things, in the second paragraph. Um,
interesting.
yeah. Oh, by the way, let me make sure everyone has this document so I can just slide it into chat. Here it comes.
So is there that it sounds like that there will be a spiral dynamics in that kind of thinking, right? Because you're starting out with this challenge bigger than your
Mhm.
abilities, capabilities that you now uh, conquer, or you get to a point where you've done it. Like you can talk about getting to the moon, right? But
Right.
you have to
Right.
actually do something.
Yep.
Now
Yep.
you've
Yep.
done it,
Yep.
but now you can advance that kind of dynamic and technologies and all these associative kinds of things.
Right.
So,
And so this is like a value that was like the driving force. So, just back to the change rate for a second, I would say to you that from what we've read there, in my experience in being raised to hear all this, as most people listening to this call were, um, America tends to have a value system that is more upgrid and outgrid.
mm,
This is where we're out there trying to be innovators. This is where we're trying to create relationships. We tend to be a very social kind of a population. This is um, where decisions are made to go out there and accomplish sorts of things, but we're responding to either problems that are in the environment or opportunities of the environment, or even needs that are in the environment, as a way to better control those things, and then maybe monetize whatever we've been able to do there. And I can certainly say that while Americans, again, going back to paragraph 2 and moving up the spiral dynamic out of this red sort of phase that we've been in, maybe, just maybe, we are starting to have more sensitivity towards the people that appear to be downgraded for whatever reason. And by the way, I don't really know that all these people that appear to be downgraded are downgraded. Remember that the upgrade powerless point and the downgrade powerless point are the exact same points. And so the highest level of tension is not stress, it is actually apparent apathy. And so it may very well be that the stressors that someone is experiencing are so overwhelming physically, emotionally, and intellectually that they have no capacity, no ability, no energy, no nothing to actually do something about it. And so they appear to be profoundly down in apathy when in fact they're experiencing extreme stress. They've just
interesting.
collapsed into this downward kind of thing. Nevertheless, I certainly know that being raised in a manufacturing kind of household, my family, as most families in the Detroit area, was involved in the auto industry. And so there was a general looking down upon laziness. So it's like, you want to change your situation. The factories are hiring. Come on, let's go. Let's just take charge of whatever your circumstances are, and from there you can improve upon them. But there definitely was this kind of situation came along. Now, um, if you want to look further at where some of this come up, where did unions come from? I
Mm,
think that unions were an attempt to introduce sets of protections to the people who were so far upgrid, they appeared to be downgrid. So you have to really factor in there's a difference between someone who's being in apparent apathy and someone who's in apathy. And you don't
Interesting.
go through apathy on the way to apparent apathy. You go through stress on the way to apparent apathy.
Interesting. Would that explain how, um, like right now, there's talk about colonizing, these other planets and Mars, and immediately I couldn't help but to think, like, okay, humanity isn't doing a good job with planet Earth. So how are we going to go and colonize, another planet?
Yeah, but you know what,
You're
Brian,
taking the same behaviors with you.
I think that there are certain cultures and certain countries scattered all over this planet that are doing an exceptional job on the humanity side of things.
Yeah, there
It
are.
just
It's
so
too
happens
far
that
few.
Right, but it just so happens that America's value system is more about solving problems, seizing opportunities is when you're talking about. I don't know that all of this space exploration would be paid for unless someone felt like there was going to be profit in it sooner or later.
Mm,
So it's still that drive to control the environment, to go out there, make the impossible happen. That's still something that's happening. So it may very well be that as far as our value system is concerned, we are at a very different place than perhaps Scandinavian countries may be, or
mhm.
any country that you can pick, probably, as far as advanced, industrialized, first world sorts of nations. I'll bet all of them do a better job on the humanitarian side of things
Yeah,
than we do. But look at what we do well.
right, right.
And we outperform them in those particular regions. Maybe we need to work towards a single planetary culture. Um,
Mm,
but one of the things I promise you that would be valued in that planetary culture is a group of people who believe that they can accomplish anything they put their mind to,
right.
you know? So, all right. The rest of all of you are being very quiet. Do feel free to chime in. If you like just joining the T and Brian show, you go right ahead. But yeah, Shags, what would you like to throw
Great
in?
observations. That's all I can say. Yes,
All
we
right.
certainly trash this planet. We don't deserve to be here anymore.
Well, right. You know, we're a
But
critter
this
that
will claim us
infests
back.
Mother Earth. Right. And we'll pay the price sooner or later. We will pay the price. And maybe, just maybe by then, all the money that was spent trying to get profit from colonizing the moon or whatever, people are going to go like, thank God, because now humanity has an opportunity to continue, even though such an occurrence would result in the near extinction. I mean, because how many people do you need in a colony? I mean, you're not going to bring a million people because you're going to be overpopulated from the get-go. So yeah. Anyway,
We're trying to
interesting.
figure out where humanity came from. It was just Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, and one of them
Right.
died.
Yeah.
And
Right.
then the second one, well, gotta
Yeah.
have some other women in there somewhere.
Yep. Stir up the gene pool. Stir up the gene pool. Okay. Anywho, so I guess what I'm saying is that this particular one feels like it lives more upgrade and outgrade, not danger zone, although I'm sure that this value system opens the door for these kinds of individuals to appear, right? And to exert control. So there are people who are hell bent on world domination, make no mistake about it, and they're out here. And I'm talking about specifically ones in the good old USA. So it came out of this spirit that anything was possible. And this spirit did, by the way, this idea about anything can be done and we don't need to be held by constraints and all that. Um, a lot of that culture, philosophy, value did get spread to other countries who embraced more of an industrialization sort of an
Mhm.
approach to growth and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think they still do look to that to some extent, but
Yeah.
of
Yep.
course the politics and that kind of thing tends to overshadow it, and then it kind of turns people away.
Yeah, yep. And again, even if we looked at any of these more humanitarian oriented sorts of countries, inside of every single one of them, I am sure that we can find plenty of people who resonate very much with paragraph number or with value number one right here, and they went on to create that particular country's or that particular culture's biggest businesses, greatest operations, big contributions to the sciences and all that. Someone has to hold this as a value, or what's driving innovation, what's driving exploration, what's driving that,
So when you talk about up and out, are you talking about like the power stress power line?
I'm talking about the upper part of power. Let's just do it starting from the center of the change grid, maybe anywhere inside the green circle, but we'll use the power point as our lower left corner. Let's go horizontal out as far as the edge of the danger zone. Then let's go up. Certainly, upper power is where I would think the healthiest versions of that value would be expressing itself. But if we end up in power stress, it may very well be that these are us stepping up to the plate when an urgent situation has arisen and meeting the challenge face on. Even though we may not have the perceived ability we wish we had, we're going to fight the good fight and do whatever needs to be done. If we go much further upgraded than that, I think we're being a bit foolish, and our assessment skills need to be brought into question. So I'm talking about this general vicinity. Yeah, think about these four subquadrants if you want. And I guess this is where emotional intelligence lived.
Mm-hmm.
Who knew that we'd ever be accused of having some overlap with emotional intelligence? Anyway, but there you go. I think it's this particular area, the change grid, not the danger zones. And by the way, if we look at the different energy layers, what layer do I have that handy? Let me see. I got them all, but these are where we get those 8 different. Here it is. This works. That's the influencer, the leader, the influencer, the energizer. That seems to culturally resonate with at least that particular value, where perhaps more humanitarian um, um, cultures are going to be a bit more in-grid. So they're going to have either a balance of all these things just enough, try to actually do what needs to be done inside of the culture's green circle or the country's green circle. But I think they could also be pushed down into thinkers, advocators, administrators. So yeah, I'm managing now whatever the that which had been advocated for. But yeah, downgrid. That's not us. Got to tell you, Brian. That's not the general American culture. Okay, thoughts, comments before we roll on to the next one? All right, then. So the next one, the change is seen as natural and positive. In the American mind, change is seen as an indisputably good condition. Change is strongly linked to development, improvement, progress, and growth. Many older, more traditional cultures consider change as a disruptive force to be avoided if at all possible. Instead of change, such societies value stability, continuity, tradition, and a rich and ancient heritage, none of which are considered very important in the United States. These first 2 values, the belief that we can do anything and the belief that any change is good, together with an American belief in the virtue of hard work and the belief that each individual has a responsibility to do the best he or she can do, have helped Americans achieve great accomplishments. So whether these beliefs are true is really irrelevant. What is important is that Americans have considered them to be true and have acted as if they were, thus, in effect, causing them to happen.
Mm. I have a hard time with some of this language in here because I'm not seeing it.
Really? Because I'm okay. I got my fellow Americans, Brian. I read this and I go, no, that's spot on, absolutely accurate. Every word of that is true.
I'm thinking not see the innovation and things like that's okay. I get it. I've been around entrepreneurship since coming to the States, but like when it comes to changing hearts, minds, and things that help people, like the citizenry live effectively,
Yeah.
I see a struggle there, like spot on struggle. Yeah, I
Wait,
mean, and
a
then we
struggle, rate a struggle to influence or a struggle to accept the
both
attempt.
sides, both sides. Then because then it's often broken up into all this weird languaging from left, right, and all this nonsense. That's the kind of stuff that don't matter because it doesn't matter in necessarily left or right. Both are going to impact people on the ground where they live and how they live. You see this in these various industries in healthcare. You see
Sure.
it in all different kinds of sectors and communities, you know, whether it's a HOA, all these kinds of things. I just don't see this as happening like at scale. So that's why I question again as I read it. I have some of these worked for a period of time,
Yeah.
served the purpose, but now they're rather downgrade with it. And they're just like, nah, no, we're gonna stay the way things are. We're gonna keep it. We're not going to rock the boat. Not gonna do any of that. That's what I see.
Brian,
Okay.
what I'm seeing too is one of the basic things, basic things that are first taught about tension managers is that people are not resistant to change, but people think they're they always say, oh, people are resistant to change. People are resistant to change. So I think you're right. There's some people that don't want to change. They really truly are resistant to it. And some people who think like that first paragraph. It's strongly linked to development, improvement, progress, and growth. But there's a split.
Got it. So that's like how they experience change, as you
Right.
mean.
And perhaps we
Yes.
could also say
Got it.
maybe the word change isn't the right one in this. Maybe control is seen as natural and positive. Control is strongly linked to development, improvement, progress. In fact, all four of those words imply enhanced control: development, improvement, progress, and growth. So the situation is changing, and we view that as a good thing, but to I'm trying to say this, but maybe as we move up the spiral dynamic, we are starting to appreciate that certain changes that brought us enhanced control, when applied at an extreme level, become problematic.
Mm,
For example, we can say that technology is seen as growth in technology is an indisputably good condition. Well, is it really? Even if we go back to the first atomic bomb, I'm sure that that was something that the people at that time went like, wait. This is something that we need to manage, eliminate, whatever it happens to be. So I think if we can make room for the fact that sometimes these changes or this attempt to gain control gets out of hand, we end up in danger zones.
mm.
Then, yeah, I think it's going to become a real problem. Yeah. Hmm.
So
Other
do you
thoughts
think
on this?
like this uh it seems like in the experience of change, like new dynamics keep adding to it and that makes the change like further and further away, if that makes sense. Like
Mhm.
the capacity to, because what humans are not good at doing behaviorally is understanding their capacity to make necessary change. In other words, that gap between taking action and the reward itself. So we'll overestimate that, but we'll underestimate capability. And so when I see all these variables, you know, like theory of constraints when it comes to making change that are in, you know, people's mind, I'm
Yeah.
always looking at, okay, what underlies this? Like when I first came to the States, right? And it was on the West Coast first and then Florida. I'll never forget in that county, Central Florida, they talked about how they are a Bible Belt. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what any of that means,
Mhm.
but essentially what they were telling me is that all these great ideas and different boards that I'm sitting on, all that stuff is great, but we're a Bible Belt. Like we're conservative, we're this, we're that. That's all I kept hearing all the time. I'm
Yep,
like,
yep.
what the hell is this? Like, what did I
All
walk
right.
into?
And so that illustrates, your point and the author's point that, these things don't apply to everybody, but they apply to enough Americans that it holds true. Because I would say to you that the American values of the South are very different than the American values of. In fact, remember when Linda brought forth that, was it about the 11
Yeah,
Yes, it's called
America?
nations.
Yeah, okay. I got to believe each one of those nations is going to be at least slightly different from another based on values that it holds.
right. Exactly.
So, and we can drill this all the way down to someone's individual values, but I can say, Brian, what you described earlier is that people have a tendency to overestimate challenge and underestimate ability.
Yes. Yeah, that
Okay.
capacity, exactly.
Right, and so that's the natural thing. So certain cultures, I'll say to you, have a tendency to overrepresent challenge and underrepresent ability.
Mm,
These are going to be the people who are going to be awfulizing situations, creating drama where it didn't need to exist because that's considered a regular part of the way their culture interacts with one another. So we need the drama. We need the what do I say, the emotionally charged descriptions of everything, blah, blah, blah. We need to underreport, underbelieve, underassess our ability and overrepresent the challenge. That's going to play out a lot. Now, I would say to you that I've worked with cultures that have a tendency to both overrepresent challenge and overrepresent ability.
ooh,
I'll
that's
talk
tough.
about those. Okay, I'll talk about those in a second. But what I think that what Americans have a tendency to do when presenting ourselves, just think about a job interview, we have a tendency to underrepresent the perceived challenge. We want everyone to think we think everything is easy. And we have a tendency to overrepresent our ability. So we're always going to polish the apple. We're always going to be looking at the bright side, putting our best face forward, all that sort of stuff is drilled into us. So our tendency culturally is to reduce the perceived challenge and increase perceived ability. As we do
Yeah.
that, psychologically, we're moving ourselves more into a place of confidence,
Mm,
right? And
got it.
presenting ourselves as being that confident, whatever it is. Well, I've worked with other cultures, one in particular, but that this holds true for is that this culture has a tendency to overrepresent the challenges that it faces or has faced historically and overrepresent its ability to meet those challenges. Now, they have an extremely long track record of success. They earn this place, and they don't mind telling you about it. So there are cultures out there who don't mind at all, yeah, becoming, yeah, overly confident, braggadocious, not so much narcissistic. I don't know if there's such a thing as a narcissistic culture, but this belief that everyone looks up to them and they look down on everybody else. I'll let you figure
Interesting.
out what culture that is.
I think I know, but I won't say. But
Yeah,
I
no,
like what you described about about the
well,
American
because I
culture.
can
I think I
actually,
can see that.
yeah, I can actually plunk two or three others in that category that are beyond the one that I know
Hmm.
most intimately. But there's that culture says, yeah, of course,
Yeah.
we want everyone to think that everything we've done was far beyond the reach of the common person. And the only reason why we are able to do it is because we possess superior knowledge, skill, ability, etc. All right, well, that's as far outgrade as you're going to get. Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, I do believe that this belief system that you are describing happens, but I don't believe it happens everywhere. I think it happens inside of certain cultures or certain subcultures inside of, large cultures like the United States or, I don't know how valid the United States culture is. If you average it out, I don't know if it really describes anybody. So maybe,
Brian,
That's
when we
why I
moved,
wondered about that hyphen. Now, I wondered about that because, to your point, like I noticed a big difference when I was living on the West Coast than the East Coast. I
Oh,
noticed a
yeah.
big difference in people who say they're from the Midwest. Their values are uniquely different. I try to explain that to people, but people don't get it.
Yeah. Well, Brian, if you studied the history of the country and I'm talking about from the anthropological perspective and refresh that area of the country from that book Linda provided, 11 Nations, 11 whatever. I think you'd find out that the people in the Midwest probably went through the toughest time adjusting when they earned their land. I mean, because that's dust belt, that's harsh winter conditions, that's all sorts of, these people had to be very hardworking and very resilient, or they simply wouldn't have made it.
Mhm.
So that's a very different mindset than if you were over on the far East Coast and your family had already been here for generations and your roots were already deeply established in an urban, relatively speaking, urban sort of a setting. That's going to have its own value system that's going to rise from it. In the West Coast, look what you had to do to get there. So these people who got there had to be adventurous spirits.
When women were fighting for the vote, the west part of the country gave women the votes very early because women were working right along with men and were considered equals.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
wow.
And so, because
Wow.
you had to be to get there. So the only way, okay, no, very few, if any, people who've settled the United States came from the West Coast. You know, they came from the East, they came over from Europe, they came over on that side of things. That means they either walked, rode a horse, or were in some sort of a horse-drawn carriage all the way to the other side of the Rocky Mountains and to the ocean. They were adventurers. They were on a quest to find the edge of the US as opposed to find a place where they could plant crops and make a living for themselves.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, back to this one. I think that if we look at the words as they're written, that this would still hold true. But American Nations, thank you so much, dear.
By
Um,
Colin Miller. I
yeah,
have to get that book.
yeah. Instead of change, such societies value stability, continuity, tradition, and a rich and ancient heritage. Now, I can certainly tell you that there are pockets of that all throughout the United States,
Mhm.
where there are these very deeply held traditions. They value continuity and stability. They're just trying to maintain their particular way of doing things. And they've assembled themselves accordingly, and they've structured themselves accordingly. And by and large, they're left to do whatever they feel like doing. So when I think of this description, I do think about the perhaps Amish communities, maybe to a lesser degree, Mennonite, Quaker kinds of communities. But certainly the Amish, I think, is a good example of this. And I also think even if you examine perhaps the more orthodox side of the Jewish community, there is a lot of tradition, continuity, rich and ancient heritage, and they're trying to protect that. I don't know how many different factions there are, if you will, inside of the Jewish faith, but I know there's more than a couple. So each one of them are distinctive enough that they're trying to continue to live in such a way that their values are running their particular show. Even if you go to, what's the name? I think it's Loma Linda, California. Isn't it one of the blue zones?
Yes, the
So,
Seventh-day Adventists.
because they're Seventh-day Adventists, which means that historically, traditionally, they have been eating plant-based diets and shunning all the kinds of things that mess humans up. And so, I get that. Well, there's a reason why they decided to assemble in Loma Linda. There's a reason why the Mormons decided to assemble in Salt Lake City. You need to have a sufficient size of population before you can start to establish a community that can operate independently. I think if you look at a lot of the Native American populations, there is still a lot of this happening, but it's separate enough that most of us don't, routinely know that such things, because they've been able to find that isolation, or that's where they've defaulted because of earlier days.
So do you think, like, if this was written back in 1988, like, is he writing this from that perspective of like this whole American humanity or culture, or is it as
I
like
think
was
he's
it
trying,
visible like these
yeah,
pockets were
I think
visible
he's
back then?
trying to say, I think he's trying to do that, but in his first 2 pages of letter, he's letting everyone know already that this stuff has a limited application and that most Americans, because of our values, would tell you that we all have our own individual values. This, we can't see it because we're in it. And so he
Mm.
separated it and started observing Americans from an external point of view. And this is what he's come up with these things. So I think he's saying that these are consistent enough that if you're visiting the country, knowing this could help you understand some things. But there are pockets of difference. And again, I do believe there are regional differences as well. And that's why it says
So
here,
where would that be on the change grid?
okay,
This
well, if we
idea
look,
that change is natural and positive,
well,
that's
did
in the
we invite
circle?
change? Okay, well, you tell me. We're on the change grid. Um, there's only 2 places on the change grid where definitive change occurs. Where are those 2 places?
Up and out,
Upgrade and outgrid. What drives upgrade changes?
the external,
External sorts of things. What's driving outgrid changes?
internal.
Internal stuff. So when I read this, I go, change is seen as an indisputably good condition, strongly linked to develop improvement, progress, and growth. I think they're basically saying
The outgrid.
changes are outgrid sorts of things. These are stuff's going to happen, and you got to adjust to it. And that's where we probably learned our resilience as a culture or as a country. So, it might be the land of opportunity, but there's a gigantic price tag attached to pursuing that opportunity. And
Right.
sometimes that price has been, greater than others.
So it
So
might need those same quadrants, right? Because you're going to need the influencer, you're going to need a
you,
leader, you're
you
going to
need
need,
this, you need this, you need this, you need this,
right.
you need this.
Okay, got it.
And so otherwise, what's driving your change? Your change is being driven by external factors. So I'm more reacting or perhaps responding. Where what we're trying to do is head things off at the pass and maybe just maybe find a way to monetize it. So
Interesting.
because we take care of ourselves, this is what it's really, really all about. We don't respond well to things being handed out. We just don't.
It's
So
such a master class for me.
well, I'm glad because and by the way, you're only hearing one American's processing of this, things that people are sprinkling in. So I think if you actually put together a discussion group just around this one document, you're going to have very different discussions based on where you happen to be in the country and what the backgrounds are of the individuals participating in it. I can
I
only,
wish we had our associate from Amsterdam on the call as well.
yeah, Dragon would be great. So we should tell him, Dragon, we need you on this next call. All right, so this next one, let's take a look at that. Here we go. So time and its control. Number 3, time is for the average Americans of utmost importance. To the foreign visitor, Americans seem to be more concerned with getting things accomplished on time, according to a predetermined schedule, than they are with developing deep interpersonal relationships. Schedules for Americans are meant to be planned and then followed in the smallest detail.
True.
So we can work our way through the other paragraphs, but let's stop there for a second.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. And those countries we were thinking about that are doing more on the humanitarian oriented side of things, they are most definitely the ones that are more interested in seeing flexibility in business dealings and rigidity, or how about less flexibility when it comes to interpersonal relationships and how this is all these things all come to be.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
France.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Where I would
Vacations
say
like
to you
crazy.
that if we were talking to our colleagues from Switzerland, they'd be going like, well, this is obvious. Why are we talking about it? The time is precious, so we're not alone. But yeah, okay. So I'm looking at that going like, yes, that's certainly true. And I can tell you that Linda is tormented by somehow the value, the belief, the whatever, that if she has 10 minutes to do nothing, she's going immediately, I can't waste 10 minutes. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I'm thinking, how can I stretch the 10 to 15?
Right.
You know, or if Kathy was on the call, how can we use this as a place as an opportunity to center ourselves and find
Yes,
more
yes,
balanced kind of thing? Let's use it. But even then, you're using it. This idea that the time can simply be allowed to pass unnoticed, that doesn't feel right.
no,
No, no.
That just
no.
doesn't feel right. Even if we're off on
Doesn't.
a vacation somewhere, do you really want a vacation of doing nothing? And when we're saying, well, doing nothing, aren't we doing something while we're doing nothing?
Exactly.
Oh, we're
Yeah.
reading a book. Oh, we're just checking our social media. Okay, that's not nothing.
Right, right. That's what's interesting about like what you described, the difference between you and Miss Linda, because like this obsession with productivity
Yep,
right now, right,
yep.
is about checking off to-do lists. Well, when you're in certain places, like when I'm in the emergency room, if I'm just checking off the to-do list without, with I should say compromising quality, someone's gonna get killed. And
You are
so
correct.
it's not just about doing. It's like, okay, what did you put into what you've done so that you can learn from it? Like when I've been interviewing people for a book I'm exploring and retooling and refueling, and I ask them about
Yeah.
what they do if they have extra 15 minutes. They're like, yeah, I gotta fill it with something, gotta get something in there.
Yeah,
You can't, no wasted time or all these slogans for it. I'm like,
right.
yeah, but you're stressed out already. Why fill
Well,
it with more?
and again, so this is where two value systems collide. And so how do we go about overcoming that? Maybe a lot of us have, because maybe we're learning that to fill every moment of every day with something is dangerous to us, like the fear of missing out. That's a very dangerous thing that younger people are certainly dealing with, or spending all their time pursuing likes and views just as a way to keep their mind and their hands busy. There is a very dark negative side of this, but culturally speaking, we have been raised to believe that time is money, and
Mm,
that when you're wasting your time, you're wasting money. This is why Americans receive no minimum vacation by law. So
Yeah,
you're
well,
aware of that, yes, Brian? Yeah.
too many people spend their life making money rather than spending their money to make a life.
Exactly right. Exactly right. But most people reach the second half of their life before they start to make that realization. And it is going against our natural trained ingrained values. And that's what he's talking about for 1988. Wait, in 1988, I was 31 years old. Oh my
wow.
God, I'm old. Um, how did this happen? But I could certainly say if I was 38 years old, I was in the throes of doing my business. And no, this is absolutely true. Time is money. You pay me for my time. You can waste it any way you want. All right.
So
So
that's an outgrid
See,
thing,
see,
yes?
yeah, go
I
ahead,
want
Edie.
to.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to add. There's a couple things. One is that when people are alone, they get in touch with themselves and they don't like what they see. So a lot of times they're just obsessively busy doing nothing. The silence is not golden for them. It's
Right.
terrorizing. Yeah.
Mm.
And the other thing I was going to say, this goes way back when I was teaching at that community college. This is in the 70s. They were doing a study. One of the big pharmaceutical companies did a study, and they found out that there was more creative thinking, innovation from people who were handicapped, paralyzed, in wheelchairs, whatever. And what they decided is that they weren't running kids to soccer and this and that, and they had that do nothing time where creativity and inspirational ideas kind of evolved.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was kind of
Very good.
yeah, it was an
That's
interesting.
really great. And so if we're filling every moment of our time, although I would say that going back to the American mindset, if an American based on this value was sitting around doing nothing but daydreaming what they could create next, we would consider that to be an active positive use of their time.
Right.
Isn't that
Right.
interesting? But just figuring out what shapes are in the clouds and and Shag says, I still like my midday nap. I do too. Oh, I do.
Yeah, it starts at 11 a.m. and runs till about 2:30 p.m.
Well, that's long for us. But Lynn and I both, if we're gonna take a nap, we need an hour and a half. We need a full sleep cycle.
That's
I
awesome.
actually like that 20-minute one that Edison used to do.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
You could do that in the office. You close your eyes, you hold your pen, and when you hear it drop, and it wakes you up.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's cool. That's
Sort of
you know,
meditation.
but if you're yeah, no, I need my hour and a half. Thank you. All right. So the next paragraph, let's take a look at it. It may seem to you that most Americans are completely controlled by the little machines they wear on their wrists, cutting their discussions off abruptly to make it to their next appointment on time. Americans' language is filled with references to time, giving a clear indication of how much it's valued. Time is something to be on, to be kept, filled, saved, used, spent, wasted, lost, gained, planned, given, made the most of, even killed. The international visitor soon learns that it is considered very rude to be late, even by 10 minutes, for an appointment in the United States. Whenever it is absolutely impossible to be on time, you should phone ahead, tell the person exactly. Um, right. Time is so valued in America because by considering time to be important, one can clearly accomplish more than if one wastes time and does not keep busy every minute. This philosophy has proven its worth. It has enabled
Mhm.
Americans to be extremely productive, and productivity itself is highly valued in the United States. Many American proverbs stress the value in guarding our time, using it wisely, setting and working towards specific goals, and even expending our time and energy today so that the fruits of our labor may be enjoyed at a later time. Delayed gratification.
I think that's what's missing from the the bigger picture is this idea of using time wisely. So
Yeah.
what Edie was describing, while that's so scientifically based, and for people who are like handicapped and those, because um, if you think about it, like when you're sick, right? It seems like life slows down, right? So you're able to create space, and that's that significance of this between taking action, effective action, and the reward. You need space for things to emerge, which means you're supposed to engage in that space.
Mhm.
Things one thing after another thing after another thing. There is no space for things to emerge, so you're just
Well,
doing a lot.
yeah. I think that if you're describing the average American, you're certainly right. Um, But I also believe that there are plenty of Americans that are doing specific jobs that are completely about this unleashing your brain, imagining what can be imagined, doing what can be done. So all the researchers, all the innovators, all the scientists, all that sort of thing, these tend to be jobs where the ability to do something like free up your mind and then to pursue whatever it is that you've done. I think that's present and vitally important in everything that we've accomplished. But the average individual has either become addicted to time wasting behaviors, um, and maybe that was because they didn't have anything meaningful to fill those time gaps with, but culturally they knew they had to fill the time. So they
Mm.
filled it with this, these behaviors that really don't result in much of anything of value to them
And
anyway.
remember, this is before smartphones.
Way before smartphones.
Mm. Yeah,
So
So
now
maybe
we have plenty of things to fill our time.
right, right. And you put that on top of this whole idea of instead of saying life work, is work life,
yeah,
right? And
right,
so
right,
that work is the big picture of everything, and that's an interesting dynamic to
right.
consider.
But I can also name cultures that are far more time focused culturally than the US is. So, I mean,
Mhm.
how many of us know of cultures whose parents tell their children that they should spend all of their time studying, doing their homework,
Mhm.
advancing their knowledge, learn to play that musical instrument, learn to do that kind of art? It's a very controlled but thorough use of every moment
Absolutely.
of
I
that
was in that
time.
culture, or as I
Ah,
say, I'm parts in that culture.
there you are. There you are. There you are. Where I can tell you that while it's true that we think more adults should be using their time well. Children are encouraged to go out of the house, go do something. If anything, we're practicing more and more, limiting the amount of
Screen
time
time.
that people have on that. In fact,
Yeah.
we're going to be done in just a couple of minutes. I wanted to share with you something I heard on NPR, an interview on NPR yesterday. I forget the person who was being interviewed, but the subject was, the question was, why are younger and younger and younger people becoming nearsighted?
Mm,
And the answer that they came up with was because we are spending so much more time looking at something that is close to us, that we are actually changing the shape of our, I guess it'd be the cornea, the retina, the cornea. And because of that, we are becoming worse and worse at seeing things at a distance and better at seeing things near. Is that what nearsighted is?
wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and there was this one particular story they were showing or sharing about this gal. She was a teenager, I forget what age, but she had spent so much time on her devices that she had basically distorted the actual shape of her cornea. So she had to sleep every night in hard contact lenses that were specifically designed to reshape her cornea into a dome. And she did it for about a year or so, but she said within a few months, she was seeing everything more sharply, more crisply. And so,
Wow.
we're talking about this use of time sort of a thing. How we use our time can also affect us physically. And ultimately, that's going to have an impact. Can you imagine if we all lost our ability to see things at a distance? Yeah.
Mm.
So anyway, there you go.
Eye doctors would love it.
Yeah, well, it's true. Anywho, we will pick up where we left off next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.